From its inception, New Balance has wanted the Rebel to be a fun and fast daily trainer. But the first two versions of this shoe were better suited for speed day than every day. But now, with slightly more stack height and slightly more width, has New Balance finally created the daily trainer they've always envisioned? This is the Rebel version 3, and it's time to take it for a run. Four miles of warm-up followed by 10 miles of pacing practice, running at my Running Buddies goal marathon pace as we get ready to run Chicago Marathon together, followed by another 6 miles for the cool down, giving us 20 miles for the day in the New Balance Rebel version 3. Now, before I give you my thoughts on this shoe, I do want to go over some disclosures. This is a pair of shoes that I bought myself. No one sent them to me. No one's paying me to make this video, and no one's going to get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with that disclosure out of the way, let's talk a little bit more about the Rebel version 3. First, let's go over some specs. In this shoe, we've got about 29.5 millimeters of stack height and a 6 millimeter drop, giving us 23.5 millimeters of stack height in the forefoot. And this shoe has nothing but fuel cell foam in it, and it is really nice the way that they've tinkered around with this supercritical foam for this year. On the outsole, we have New Balance's endurance rubber. And one of the interesting things about the way that New Balance has been using rubber on this shoe, at least for this year and in last year, is that the rubber seems to be kind of inset into the foam. And one of the things that does is disguise the fact that I think there is a lot of rubber outsole on this shoe. I know there's some exposed portions, but where there is rubber on the outsole, I do think it goes pretty thick. Moving to the upper, we've got a dual layer mesh here with an outer kind of almost transparent layer that sits on top of a thin layer underneath to give it lots of structure, but also breathability. There is a light amount of padding as you get into the back of the shoe and a very light amount of structure in this heel cup. It's still a little bit flexible though. And otherwise, things are pretty stripped down and minimal. There's very little to the tongue here, which I very much appreciate. Overall, this shoe comes in at a very light weight of 209 grams and 7.4 ounces. So let's now talk about what it's like to run in this shoe. Running in the Fuel Cell Rebel version 3 is a delight. I really like what they've done with the Fuel Cell foam in this version. It has a great amount of squish and bounce to it. It's very pleasant in the way that supercritical foams are typically a lot of fun to run in. The main sensation that I'm getting from this shoe is the lightness and kind of the energeticness. Is that a word? Energetic, and the energeticness and how energetic it feels every time your foot hits the ground. It just feels like there's a very quick response every time that foot hits the pavement, which I find to be very lively and exciting. And because of their use of supercritical foam in this shoe, it doesn't have a lot of weight or structure to it necessarily. And so there's a very kind of minimalist feel to this shoe. It's very lightweight, it's very flexible, and it feels like it's a very neutral shoe. And because of that, it doesn't really feel like it can go the distance. In my testing of this shoe, I did take it out for just like a regular, easy 8-mile run the day before the 20-miler. And after the 8-miler, I was like, this shoe feels great. It does feel like it has a little bit more underfoot to protect me when I'm going on my runs than the prior year's Rebel version 2 did, which I thought was a great speed day shoe, but not necessarily a great daily trainer. And I had this thought that I wasn't sure it was going to be able to go the distance for, say, a 20-mile run, but yet it did a fantastic job on this 20-mile run. And it reminded me in a lot of good ways of the Pegasus Turbo, which had that thin layer of React, a thin layer of ZoomX, and just never felt like there was enough stack height in there when I looked at it on paper or thought about how much foam there was to protect the feet. And yet I could take it for 20-mile runs, or I could take it for a speed workout, and it did both of those things just fine. I feel like we got the same thing going on here in the Rebel version 3. And it's kind of confusing that it does that this year, because I'm not really sure that there are really dramatic changes, at least in terms of some of the geometries of these two shoes. Now, the Rebel version 2 and the version 1 had this kind of weird lateral flange right here that I think kind of change the way your foot hit the ground a little bit when you were running in this shoe. But otherwise, there isn't a ton of difference in stack height, and there isn't a ton of difference in the shaping of these two shoes. I feel like the Rebel version 3 might be like a touch wider in certain spaces in the forefoot, but like in the toe box, it curls over a little bit earlier, and in the midfoot, like underneath the arch of the shoe towards the heel, it does feel a little bit narrower. So it's wider in spots, narrower in other spots, and there's just a touch more midsole foam to kind of protect you underneath. I think that they've also kind of tweaked the fuel cell formulation that goes in the shoe in version 3 versus version 2. And I think all of those kind of little changes have really gone to make this shoe kind of like push out of that speed day realm into a little bit more of that everyday realm. So it is still a lightweight shoe. It still has a little bit more of that road feel. It's still a shoe that you can take for your workouts, but it also now just has enough to be that daily trainer as well. So for those of you who are looking for one shoe that can kind of cover both of those categories, I think the Rebel version 3 is going to really be able to shine on those easy days as well. And I think it really goes to the nature of that fuel cell foam. It amazes me how like kind of much they can do with so little of the foam. And I think that now in the third version, New Balance is really starting to dial in just how much or just how little of the foam they need to put in this shoe in order to make a really fantastic daily trainer that has some versatility, that has some range in it, that can go the 20 miles for your long run, but also can be used for strides, some threshold work. It just feels so nimble and kind of like flickable in terms of being able to change paces quickly that I wouldn't hesitate to bring this for a track day as well if I had some longer repetitions that I wanted to do on that kind of surface. While I still don't think I'm going to be reaching for this shoe on a recovery day where I'm looking for a max cushion shoe to really pamper the feet, I do think that now the New Balance Rebel version 3 is a shoe that I can reach for on easy days, and I can insert it into the rotation on a much more frequent basis. And I think that most of the people that were really happy with last year's Rebel are still going to enjoy this year's Rebel. And the people like me who thought that last year's Rebel just didn't quite have enough to handle the rigors of every day are going to really enjoy running in this shoe as well. But I'm really curious now to know how you guys are going to be using this shoe. Is this now a daily trainer for you? Is this something that you're going to be taking for your long runs? Let me know in the comments down below, or better yet, stop by the live stream I do Monday through Friday right here on YouTube. I'd love to talk to you guys in the chat. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of the video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I will see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?